clear to say that I want to talk about the why. Steve's going to really focus on the how. My part will be very short, as there's a lot more detail. So, the MathWorks development MRP process. So MathWorks has a suite of products that we sell, about 90 plus products that we release on a 6-month cadence primarily. In order to do that, we do what we call an MRP, which is a multi-release plan. We want to understand what each team is delivering to the marketplace, what they've done in the last 6-month time frame for us, and looking forward into the next 12-month time frame. What is your plan? What is your roadmap? And this is kind of at a higher level. It's not the day-to-day user story. This is more at the epic level. What are you trying to deliver to the marketplace? It gives marketing an idea of what they can go off and start talking to customers about, and it really helps us look for synergy between teams. It's really strongly rooted in our 6-month release cycle. We have lots of release cycles here at MathWorks, but still the primary release cycle is a 6-month one. We release all of our products twice a year. So just give you an idea what our releases look like on the right-hand side there. And again, like I was saying, the goal of the MRP review, and this is typically something where we don't do titles at MathWorks, so it's hard, I can't throw out like director or whatever, but it is like the main leaders of engineering will get together in a room along with the key stakeholders and talk about how we did in the outgoing 6 months, what did the team deliver, how was our quality, what did we learn from that, and that would be like the outgoing release. And then we want to talk about that plan for the upcoming 12 months. What are the key themes? What are the gaps we're trying to solve in our product set? What are the big team priorities? How will the team be allocated? So just looking at this at a rough, very high level, we can get a quick view of here's how I think this team's going to work for the next 6 months, really looking at that next 6 months. And is there some opportunity here or some synergy that we could have? So MRPs serve 2 purposes. They are there to help the team. It really helps them provide a plan and checkpoint. It gives them a way to assess their past performance, really look and determine and refresh dependencies between teams, revisit product strategy. So part of the preparation for MRPs, we ask everybody to look at what their long-term vision is for their product area and make sure that we're addressing the gaps in those product areas. And then they really have that moment in the sun with senior management. Now, this doesn't sound like a big thing, but when you talk about a development organization of 2,000 people, 250 plus teams, this is that, so for some people, it might be the only time that they see all of these senior managers in one place and get guidance from them in one place. So this is really like that advisory board for the team. Here's what you're doing, here's why it's important. I think you should sync up with this other team and figure out you should work together. And it's really important. And for senior leadership that are in that meeting, and these go on for weeks, each app area that we call here, like the simulating side and the MATLAB side of the house here at MathWorks, each one of those areas takes upward of 2 weeks of solid management reviews. So at the end of that 2 weeks, you're tired. And I sit through quite a few of them, not as many as I used to, thankfully. People in this audience have to do that instead of me. But you really get a sense for, wow, this is what we're going to do in the next 6 months. And I heard the same thing from these 3 teams, and boy, they better get together and talk about this because we could create a mess for our customers if we're doing the same thing 3 different ways. So really, it's a chance to provide guidance and really see and understand, when you have a team this large, what all is going on. So where did Jira and structure fit in? Because that's what you guys came here to hear about. You don't want to hear about the MathWorks development process. So back to our big planning bubble is something that we do at a big scale. 18 months, we're looking at 6-month chunks. But the teams are down here working in their sprint length. We don't mandate a sprint length here at MathWorks. We don't have a standard sprint. We give teams that flexibility. We allow them, where we impose our standards are at the planning level. So, as far as the day-to-day execution of work, that's in Jira software. Teams have some flexibility, and there are some standards we impose, but for the most part, we provide them the flexibility to do things they need to do in Jira. Where we impose more of the structure to understand how MRPs are working is using structure. And there are good reasons for that. It allows you to give this 2 views into all of this work. We found out long ago that if you don't have MRPs tied to the day-to-day work in some way, then you're going to be just telling 2 different stories. People were coming to MRP reviews with, here's what my team's going to do, and then you go look at the work management tool they're using, and they're doing something very different. Or those are 2 of the same thing, but they're called different things, and no one knows what's going on. So we really need to have that consistent connection between both the high-level planning and the day-to-day work execution, work management. So we use structure to not only craft our MRPs, we also use structure to auto-generate our MRPs. And I'm showing a view of, this is a document that's evolved over time, but this is our standard MRP document. Doesn't look like a lot. I'm not going to get into all the columns and what's there and why it's there. But the management team is 250 teams, walk through management reviews, produce this document. Everybody sees it. They know what it all means. It's consistent. So if you're a senior manager and you walk into a management review, you can look at this document and say, oh, I get what your team is doing. And these are teams with very different sprints, very different projects, maybe even very different structures. So why did we decide to use ALM Works Structure to do this? So the big thing for us was structure didn't impose a format on us. Other tools we looked at, like Portfolio, for instance, really wanted you to have all the teams working in a very specific way in order to extract maximum value. That was not going to happen at MathWorks. And it's something that we're continuing to work on, but we just think that teams need a lot of flexibility down at the Scrum level. It addressed a lot of our existing pains with the existing tooling. We're not going to talk a lot about our existing tooling that we had before. Just suffice to say, I've been on a 10-year journey for work management tooling here at MathWorks, and it'll probably continue for the next 10 years as well. We needed a platform for metadata collection, and Steve's going to talk much more about this. And the big thing, the API was there, and it worked really well, and that really helped us drive migrating 250 MRPs for all of these teams, 2,000 users, and we moved everybody into the new system over a 9-month period. A lot of people in this audience who helped make that happen, so thank you for that. So next up, I'm going to bring Steve Kamens. He's going to talk about how that happened.
That's good, thank you.
Oh, you're good.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so I'm going to talk about what happened over the last year. It's been quite a journey. So there were a lot of challenges. I'm going to go over those, and then what we did and the solution, a little bit about the data organization that we have in Structure, and then a little more about the migration process that we used. So the challenge, we knew we had to have an MRP document, 250 of them, produced from our work management system. We were using a cloud-based system, and we were getting off of that and moving to Jira. The data in that system was all organized with metadata. There was no plugins or structure or anything like that that we could use. One big difference between Jira and this was it had unlimited hierarchy. In Jira, it was more limited, and that was something we knew that we had to overcome. And as I mentioned, the reporting was coming from the legacy system, and that would need to be switched over. So migrating to Jira, so I put the challenges into two big categories. One is the data organization. We had one system where we had to organize it in a special way just so we could pull it out the way we needed. We were going to a different system that would have different data organization. We needed to find a way that we could model what we had. And then the scale. There were approximately 15,000 issues in this legacy system that shall go unnamed, and we needed to get that into Jira quickly. So just very briefly, in the system that we had, it was really just, we had an activity and it had metadata. Which MRP is it on? What is the theme? What is the sub-theme? What is the time frame? And a bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to show because it doesn't really affect the overall process. So there's the document, Jason had shown one. So again, it had themes and sub-themes. In our legacy system, those were just metadata on each task. And this is what it looked like in that system. So in addition to this reporting we pulled out, we also needed to develop views to work within the system. So in the legacy system, we had different views you could use to see different columns and groupings, and we needed to maintain that in Jira as well. So in the legacy system, again, everything was metadata. It was error prone. A lot of times people would drag things and things would go haywire and we'd lose it, and there was no undo. It was hard to visualize. Because everything was metadata, there were certain ways we could report it, but you couldn't get a good overall view of how things were organized. and it was difficult to update and organize. So within structure, and the colors map to what solved each thing. So as Jason mentioned, there was drag and drop within structure. It had an undo, which was very important to us. There's a very rich view management system where you can create views and share them and assign them to different structures and different default ones and do permissions on them and everything, so that was good. The inline editing was great. One thing is in Jira, when we first were looking at it, you do a search, or maybe you look at everything in the project in a search. You can't do anything with that unless you open up the panel and then start working there. But in structure, we were able to view everything and just edit it inline. We found that pretty helpful. And the other thing is that what's cool about structure is really just organizing what's in Jira by pointing to the things that are in Jira. So you can have the same issue appear on multiple structures and multiple folders, and when the issue itself got updated, it would be updated everywhere. So that was a pretty good feature. So as I mentioned, we'll have a whole bunch of activities and with all their data. And here's what it would look like in structure. So we chose to pull out the metadata and create folders. So you see this folder, theme, sub-theme. Those are folders that can be dragged around. You can pull the epics into different folders, change the organization without having any effect on the Jira projects. Have things from different projects, so that was pretty helpful. One thing, there's this new custom issue type that's called a plan. So if I mention that, you'll know that that's what's used to indicate what work is being done within one of those 6-month development cycles that Jason mentioned. So as I mentioned, we also want to work within the tool with different views. So structure has these multiple views. So we defined those. It also has filters. We defined filters depending on what you're doing. There's actually a whole bunch more that we have now to filter which time frame you're working on, which release you're working on. Maybe you only want to see the epics or plans or something, or even just showing the things that are assigned to me, but show it within that structure format. You can do that. And the inline editing of our custom fields was really important. So that's the organization of the data. And then the next challenge was migrating all this data. So we knew that we were in between cycles. We were trying to get this done without disrupting people too much because we couldn't stop one of those 6-month planning cycles. And there was no tool to do that migration. We saw that there were some plugins or things from companies for other products, but the legacy product we were on was not big enough to merit that. So we had our legacy system. The obvious thing, the Jira APIs, and I'm not going to focus on the Jira APIs. They're great. They're helpful. So we used those to pull out the data. And then there was a lot of transformation. Where in the legacy system, we might have one issue. In Jira, we needed 2 because of the way we were modeling it. So we would look through all that data and clean it up. And then push that into Jira with again, with the Jira APIs. And then the cool part about structure was you could organize it all, create the folders, move things into the folders, and change the order using those APIs. And so here's some of the stuff that was done with the APIs. Permissions, creating folders, you can read all the things. Really just getting it exactly how it was. So at the end of one of these transitions, you could compare generating from the old system and the new system and make sure they're the same, or find out they're not and come to me to complain. So I'm going to go a little into the structure API, not go into any detail here, but it's usable. It was very powerful, but it's a little difficult to use. All structure are defined by a forest, and a forest is just a list of everything that's in that structure. And each of those things is one of these 3-faceted entities. And you can see there's the middle one is the hierarchy level, and then if you see the one with the slash in there, that's a structure item. It could be a folder. It could be automation, which is a way that they can automate grouping or filtering or pulling in objects automatically. If it doesn't have the slash in it, then you know that it's a Jira issue, and that's the ID of that Jira issue that you can use to then query and get some of the attributes. So that's a forest. It's pretty daunting when I first looked at it, until we figured out the parse. It would be nice to be able to just get the objects themselves and attributes in an easier way, but this is what you query on, and then this is what you update to change things as well. So the process that we use, now this is just the kind of the business process that we use to move all these MRPs. First we gathered a spreadsheet of all the MRPs, and then for the ones that we were moving at any time, we would auto-create a bunch of help tickets and assign them to the program managers. Then the program manager would enter the details we need. Who's the project lead? What's the name of the source project from which we're pulling this? Who are some of the other team members? What do you want the new structure to be named? So all the information that we would need. Then we'd run the migration script. I'm going to show you what that did on the next slide. I would assign that back to the PM, and that's where they would go in and make sure first does it look right in general, and if you really want to check, compare the old one with the new one and make sure that they're close enough. And then they'd close the help issue, and we were good. So this migration script had a bunch of phases. This was a evolution over time as the script evolved to become very kind of simple, because it was one script. It would create the projects. We had our template project configuration. It would set the lead and the project roles and the category. Then it would import the issues. So pull all the issues from our cloud-based system, add the issues into Jira, and copy the metadata, different field names. So of course I had to map those. Then we would create the structure. Structure permissions, you can base them off of Jira projects, and that's what we did. So we said, for this structure, give anyone who's an admin on this project control privileges, and give everyone who's a developer edit privileges. So that was pretty good. So then we wouldn't have to edit those as we move forward. Standard filters we were added. We had a set that we're using. And one thing with that is it's not documented. We sniffed the network and figured it out, and it works great. Also, ALM Works Help pointed us in the way to do it. So then we'd add the issues to structure, insert the issues, create those folders, and then organize everything within those folders. So by the time it was done, a migration would take maybe 3 minutes, which is really good. So that was the MRP model, and I just want to show one other type of migration we did. We also wanted to migrate some of these projects with deep hierarchies into Jira. So this is in our old system, and you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deep. You can't do that in Jira because we have epic story subtasks. So we had another script that would recreate that hierarchy just using the stories, and people could work in there. Also, if they were moving away from the deep hierarchy, at least it would give a reference to how it used to be so they could see how it was and clean it up. So some tips about using structure. When you get structure, it adds some enhanced structure JQL, which is great because you can say, just in Jira, show me everything that's in this structure, or even show me everything that's in this structure and in this folder. Very powerful. And much faster than querying the forest, I found. Very strongly recommend using different views for different activities. There's a limited number of columns that you can see on the screen at once, although we hear there's an enhancement coming out for that very soon, and we're looking forward to that. But especially when you're showing things in the conference room, things can get pretty squished. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, question. Most of the work I did, I've used JQL to set up anything that I'm pulling out of Jira. Have you used the other approaches for grabbing data and any thoughts on that?
I've used them in the structure JQL and API for some custom things.
Yeah, okay. As opposed to basing things on other structures or...
Yeah, yeah. We've done it a bunch of ways. We've even used structure queries in our for swim lanes in our boards. So that was, this one is this folder, this one is this folder, and that was pretty cool. Again, the filters, it was an undocumented API, and ordering of permissions, this was not intuitive. You want to put your more permissive permissions lower. So if you have view, make sure you put edit and then control, or else anyone who's in two groups would get the view when they should get control. So once everything was in Jira and Structure, so we want to generate MRPs, and I didn't even realize I had animation here. So this is pretty basic how we would do. We would select the structure. We have a page where you can go in and say, well, what MRP do you want to generate? Use the APIs to examine the forest and pull out the themes and sub-themes and all the data, and then you get your MRP document that looked just like the old one. So where do we stand? We're entering our second season this spring using Jira and Structure. This is the first time that the whole company's in. We had a pretty large percentage in for the last planning season. We're continuing to analyze and design and refine our process, the way that the data is organized, and things are going pretty well. So thank you for listening.